Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Simkins, and this is Wins for Widows, where you get practical guidance and advice from the mouth of professionals who are all of us united in helping you get your feet back on the ground after experiencing the loss of a loved one. Together, we'll uncover the rooted question that you might be asking yourself, what now? And what do I do next? Today, I'm excited to introduce to you and to host with you Wendy Wright. Wendy comes to us from Colorado. She's out of the Denver area, and she is a financial therapist, a money coach, and a money story specialist, and one of the first therapists in the nation to focus primarily on financial therapy, bringing over 20 years of experience as a therapist, including more than 10 years dedicated to financial therapy, which is absolutely intriguing to me, Wendy. I love the behavioral and the therapeutic part of money. Wendy's the founder of the Wendy Wright Financial Therapy Approach and creator of the 10 Principles of Financial Therapy and author of, and I love this title, Wendy, you're going to have to tell me
Mhm.
more about this, The Intersection of Money and Milkshakes. Healing through
Yeah.
the money and food connection. I love that. Very cool. And having weathered profound loss and rebuilt her own financial life, she can help us understand that you're not broken with money and there's always a deeper story underneath that pattern. So, Wendy, welcome. Great
Thanks,
to
Mitch.
have
I'm
you.
really happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first, I got to know this title, Healing Through
Yeah,
the Money and Food Connection. Whenever I see food, I'm thinking I got to know that.
absolutely. It's a key part of how I evolved into doing financial therapy because I do it pretty exclusively now. That's what I focus on. But I've been a therapist for over 25 years. And in the course of that, I had developed specialty in eating disorders and intuitive eating and helping people heal their relationship with food, body, and exercise, which is sort of what I call that little bucket there.
Okay.
And one of the things that I began to notice was a very interesting parallel language first and behavior next. As they moved out of food, body, and exercise behaviors to regulate emotions, I noticed they were moving into money kind of behaviors, spending, saving, debting, gifting, all kind of different for everybody. And it
Interesting.
intrigued me. This was about a decade ago. And I began to look into, like, has anyone else noticed this intersection or this, like, yeah, between money and emotions?
Mm,
Found just a few people at that point that was just beginning to be a phrase. The Financial Therapy Association was just born in
ready,
that same
start.
time period.
Yeah.
And I just moved right into it very naturally and have been
Interesting.
practicing it. And
Interesting.
it's really cool.
Huh. Well, they say everything starts with your belly and with the food, right? And your career started with that.
Little bit, yeah,
The way to get to somebody's heart is through their stomach, and the way to
can
get to
be.
your career was through the stomach. That's really cool.
Mhm.
No, it's really a cool transition. That's fun. No, I'm intrigued by your work, and I think our listeners today are going to get a lot from what you have to say. So help us understand this, right? It's fairly new, or at least it was. And
Yeah.
how is it different than like a financial advisor or even a grief counselor? And what does that difference really mean for widows specifically?
Yeah. That's such a great question. How to differentiate financial therapy from other things that are happening in the financial world. Often, financial planner, advisor, that's a thing I'm asked quite a bit. How does it differ? And then, even coming into the life of a widow who might be also seeing a grief counselor, I think this is a lovely bridge between the two because there is, when there's money involved or any sort of bucket of resources. But when that's involved here, there can be financial planners or advisors, people who are saying, here are some tools, here are maybe some products, here's a spreadsheet of what you have and what it will turn out to be and how it can be used. And then on the other end of that, working with a grief counselor can be really helpful as well because there are such huge implications of grieving. There are, as many people have heard, there are certain stages and phases of grief. They are not linear. One of the most common emotions that is involved with grief is anger and sadness, but also there's first a lot of stuckness, a lot of like staring into space, looking at blank walls, not knowing, what to do. It's out of that fight, flight, freeze. It's sort of that freeze part. And so, and yet money doesn't stop. It can't freeze. We wish if you could take a break from it, like I'll get back to you in a year, but it still has got this active energy of doing something. And so being able to come into how can I talk about, look at, think about this money and grieve at the same time is really challenging. And sometimes that's where my role comes in very much as a bridge between the two, whether it's just to talk it over. Maybe we role play how to discuss something with a financial planner. Like how do I how do I approach those meetings when I just really want to sit there and cry and they're asking me, this. And so the being able to bridge that and look at, okay, here's what you're working on with your grief counselor, here's what you've got with your money, and I'm going to help you come in the middle of this and figure out what the heck to do.
Very cool. So where the advisor might be a little more tools driven or
Hmm.
money numbers driven, you
Hmm.
help kind of get below all that.
Yeah.
So if someone's stuck, right, because
Hmm.
a widow, because that grief is just such a massive part of that experience,
Hmm.
that's where you come in to help them really understand what is it that's making you stuck or fearful or
Hmm.
anxious or whatever those terms might be. You help that. And how do you do that, Wendy? How do you start with someone? What do you do like to begin that process?
Well, one of the first things that I do for anybody, but especially someone who's going through a process that's so emotionally intense as a loss and having to keep your feet under you, so to speak, in that time. As I mentioned, financial therapy is relatively new, and so as I have taught other therapists to do this, as I present on it, as I speak on it, I developed what I call 10 principles of financial therapy. And the way I describe this is the first one always has to come first. And this is exactly where I would start with a widow that's going through a loss at whatever stage she's in. It could have been last week, it could have been 5 years ago. It doesn't matter. We want to first dive in with compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. So we really want to remove that. We want to be able to create this space where they can just talk about things.
Mm,
Often I find, for instance, a woman who is a little bit overwhelmed by financial jargon, especially if she hasn't been the main sort of like overseer of the finances, which is still common that she wasn't. Then we want to begin to step into that. And she might not really know, like, what does IRA stand for? What is Roth? What are these vehicles? What is an index fund? Like, there's a lot of those questions that often she's embarrassed to ask. And especially if it's, someone she's not spent a lot of time talking to, which is often the case as well. Sometimes it's as simple as trying to figure out how to log into some of the accounts. And again, she's just too embarrassed to ask the question. But what happens then is nothing is tended to for 6 months, a year, 2 years later. And so being able to come into this and break it down and take away any judgment, take
mm,
away any of the shame of like, oh, I should have, why
yeah,
didn't I? That
yeah,
kind of stuff
yeah. I
really
see that.
helps us begin to step into it. Yeah,
Yeah, I see
yeah,
that a lot, and I
absolutely.
see somehow their spouse is still with them in their mind and somehow
Yes.
overlooking and judging them and
Hmm.
saying like,
Hmm.
"I can't believe you did that." Do you see that
Right.
quite a
Oh,
bit as well?
yes, it's really tough because, now we're coming into the loss has occurred. So there's no more preparation for the loss at this point. It's happened and we're going to move forward. And that's where as I talk about money story, like part of what we mean here because you've got your life story and you've got the story of the money that's happening, whether we look back to get context over how did we get to where we are today, whether we're going to look forward. And so one of the questions I'll ask women is to think about what story do you want this money to tell so that they can begin to look at it. But beginning to think about what story did y'all want the money to tell? If they're still really attached to, and often they are, their spouse's money, thoughts and feelings, opinions, then asking, okay, then what story did you want it to tell? Then we could begin to kind of look at that. And if one of the stories is that we wanted to tell that there's a lot of safety, for instance, then we talk about, okay, what money vehicles create safety? what's, kind of so we can look at what story you want it to tell. And then I can walk people through because I'm also a money coach. So I feel, and that's why I created what I call the Wendy Wright financial therapy method because it involves coaching as well. Not every financial therapist does that. So we might look at here is a method or a tactic or something, and then we look at the emotions on it. So it helps them begin to step into how do they begin to own this money is a big part of this transition.
That first piece is just getting rid of the guilt, the shame, the blame, all that stuff. That's the first
Yes,
is that the
just taking
first
that
thing you
judgment
recommend
out.
is let's just not judge
Absolutely.
it.
I have yet to find a place where judging helped us at all with our money. So we want to remove it.
Is there
We want
anything else like that right at the beginning if they're stuck or frozen? Any of our listeners that are stuck and feel like they just can't get there, the grief is just too much and they know they need to. Any other like early things that they should
yeah.
jump onto and say, I need to be doing this?
Yeah, there's a couple of other things that I will often focus on. And one is to if we're just beginning this and we feel really stuck, to limit any interaction with money to a very short window of time. Maybe that's every person's difference on their tolerance. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's an hour. But
Uh,
most of us will know, we can notice when we check out. So maybe you log into an account or you're sitting down with your financial advisor and you begin to have a conversation and all of a sudden you're like, well, what do I need at the grocery store later? And did I get a birthday present for so and so? It's like, boom. Okay. That without judging it, that tells us that was it. That was the window. And then begin to work within that. And then if it's a 10-minute window, then beginning to, if it's a short window, I encourage them to walk into that with no more than two actual goals, like very short. Maybe it's just log in or maybe it's make this phone call or whatever it is so that they're stepping into it very slowly and very compassionately.
Good. No, I love that. I know as an advisor, there's definitely different bandwidths too I've experienced. And I've tried to see like, is there a pattern around time from loss, method of loss? Was she a caregiver? To really think, okay, here's what I'm going to expect. One thing I've learned is there is no rules. There is no every
Yeah.
single person. But to your point, I watch and see, it looks like we're done. It
Hmm.
looks like this level, at least that level of conversation needs to be over and we need to shift to something lighter or a little
Hmm.
less heavy. And it needs to be shorter. And to your point, Wendy, after every meeting, it's like, look, we got these 10 things, we got forever to finish them. These two, we got to do in the next 2 weeks. Cause it's just, they're already overwhelmed. And then sometimes I think as financial advisors, we overwhelm them even more to your point
It
of just
can.
being
It can
focused.
happen. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that comment. So just taking little bite-sized pieces of it and letting yourself in as long as the emotion and the attention can handle it. And that attention has changed, right? That attention
Yeah.
has changed because of that fog that
And
is
it's very
experienced. It's very
personal.
real. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Even it can depend on what time of year it is, and that's different for everybody as well. Like, maybe their story was they traveled for 3 months every summer, so summer is gonna be harder for that person, and someone else may have an experience where holidays are really big for them, so that'll be a really tender so knowing your story without judging it can be really powerful, and knowing that it's different for everybody all the time. That's in fact, when I'm working with people just
Mm,
in talking about grief,
mm,
within a system of whether it be children, adult children, or siblings, or any, kind of like that, to recognize everybody grieves at a different pace and there's
yeah,
no right or wrong way. So
yeah.
beginning to notice that as well. And then everybody approaches money in a different way. And again, without judging it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so it's just not the relative distance since the loss. It's what month are we
Right.
in and what went on in your life before.
Hmm.
That's really insightful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
There's also a principle of, I think what you called grief money. This is
Yes.
sacred. I call it sacred money sometimes. Money that had a very specific meaning to a widow and her spouse. And it makes it really hard that's like special money. It takes a whole new group of understanding around that. Talk a little about that. What do you find with that? Where does it come from? And how do you really help someone move through that, especially if this money happens to be the majority of their
Mhm.
assets of their living.
Yeah. Yeah, this idea of grief money is so powerful, and I think it also really plays into that concept of story. So really looking back at the story with the person that they've lost and where this money came from and what was the intention of putting it into, because at this point we're talking about money that typically has been stacked and held and saved and put aside for whatever purposes. So, and that was a story they told as a couple. Now we're moving into a phase where she's going to either kind of take action into that story. If was this to be monthly income? Was this to be given certain places? Kind of those pieces. So being able to connect that storyline can be really helpful. And again, taking it one thing at a time, if that's the case, but also recognizing that this is one of my other principles, that we make a plan, but a plan is only as good as the adjustment process. And as with anyone, she's going to run into the need to make adjustments, whether, for all kinds of different reasons. Maybe housing needs change, maybe care needs change. And so there might be money that's mapped out for certain things and adjustments have to be made. And so coming back into, oh, how do I do that?
Okay.
And
So how do you get them?
recognizing,
How do you get them there if it's her husband and her had this certain? That's I think where the
yeah,
friction occurs, right? When it's something
yeah.
different than what was talked about.
Well, and there's a loss if letting go of what they intended as a couple or what the husband intended when they, even if it's a few years later and they're letting go of that intention because there's a new thing that's arisen, maybe even new relationships or whatever is coming up for them, then there's going to be a little cycle of grief. Sometimes grief can happen in a 30-minute cycle, an hour, a weekend, where you just feel that anger, sadness, shock, denial, bargaining, moving into acceptance and recognizing, okay, I'm shifting the use of these resources, and that is disconnecting me in one more way from that person that I cared about.
Okay. So just acknowledging like this is going to be part of this process and I'm probably going to feel these feelings again because
Yes.
of that. Okay. And just that alone will help kind of move beyond it. Do you have other things that you teach that help them to then be able to make the move when they know they need to?
Yeah, when they are going to look at doing something,
Yeah.
anything with
Yeah.
money. Yeah, whether spending it on something fun, spending it on someone they care about, all these different kind of things.
Yeah.
I come back to that compassion and curiosity and no judgment, first of all, like really pausing, looking at what's happening, asking her at that point, what story do you want these resources to tell? What is the story a few years from now? You want to look back and say, okay, this is what I had and this is what happened. And is that and also is what we're looking at sustainable? I really talk a lot about, is this money habit or pattern behavior decision sustainable over time? And then beginning to look at that, because sometimes the pressure of feeling like you have to make a decision can that makes a decision for you. That's not always the most sustainable decision or the decision that's going to help keep everything connected long term. So looking at both of those things, looking at the energy behind the decision, where they're coming from with it. And again, just having the space with me, because I usually meet with clients every other week for months at a time. So we're going to be able to take some time with this and look at, here's what I think I want to have happen. Let's role play that out. What's it going to feel like in a year from now? What's it going to feel like in a few years from now? Being able to run some numbers, maybe look at, okay, here's what your net worth is. Here's what your growth has been. And what do you want that to be? Sometimes even just running those numbers in session is really helpful, because we're just
Mm.
doing it at the pace that they're ready for. And we've got time. We've got lots of meetings. We're going to have lots of meetings. We have lots of time together.
I love that. I love that. I see that a fair amount. I see that a fair
Yeah.
and I see it as a huge challenge, and it is I love that you said it's an additional loss.
Yes.
It's an
Hmm.
additional loss, it's a secondary loss that they're dealing with, and I think sometimes just recognizing that can be certainly, helpful. And to not think, oh, I'm different. I'm experiencing this differently than every other widow. I mean, definitely there's differences, but there are some similarities that are consistent across
Mhm.
that. No, I love that. So we also talked about this, the money story starting from middle school. How do you help widows and anyone really trace that back? And why does that really matter? The story that we have about money. I call it the relationship because I say we all have
Yeah.
a relationship with money, whether we love it or not. It's either good to us or bad to us. We love it, we hate it, but there's this relationship. So how do we track that back, and how does understanding that for ourselves from our own lives help anyone, widow or not widow, better with money?
Yeah. Well, we want to move into a place where our relationship with money, because I do see it as a relationship, and a relationship, like in most any way you're looking at it, is something where there's a feedback loop. So with money, it's like, I have this money, I'm going to make this decision, then this happens, and I feel this way, and that comes back to what will I do next time? Sort of like we have these feedback loops, and so when we look back. And I always say we look back for context, not to hang blame, because that keep then you get stuck. But money has to keep moving forward. So we look back at things like, where did your money beliefs come from? Who were your key money influences growing up? And sometimes people will often say, I often hear from clients, nobody taught me about money, quote unquote. And it may be the case that no one sat down and said, here is how you do money, but
Yeah.
we often learn more about money from being around people and observing things. Maybe and that's why I say it starts pretty early on. If you think back to maybe you began to notice people have different shoes on, different lunch boxes, different vacations, different clothes. Like there's lots of ways in which you see resources can be different, and then decisions around resources can be different. When we look back and get context, sometimes that helps us know, like, why was this hard for me? Why was I scared to do this or not do this? When the more you understand it, the more you have awareness of where your money beliefs are built, the
Mm,
more you're able to move away from them and maybe think, okay, this is how I used to do it. This
mm,
is how I want to do it now. And
mm.
that's another thing where I come into shifting out of the sort of polarization of being good with money or bad with money, because I do not think that's really a truth. We want to just look at, I'll ask questions like, okay, what did you like about this? What did you not like about it? What do you want more of or less of? So that we get less boxed into, I'm bad with money, or, he was good with money and I'm bad with money, because that leads to certain things. If you think you're bad with money, you don't pay attention to it. You don't log into your accounts. You hope for the best, whatever it might be that leads you with that. Or maybe you go to the other extreme and you obsessively write down all your bills on every piece of paper you see. You're like, oh, let me write them all down again. I'm not sure I remember them. Like there's sort of a recurrent obsession over doing that. And sometimes that's how someone responds to believing they're bad with money. So we look at it, we see, okay, what's been going on with this? And then where do we want to move with that? And putting it in the context of a story is something a lot of people can connect to, or a relationship. They're like, okay, I understand story. I understand relationship. Maybe they don't speak spreadsheet, but they do know story. And so as we begin to build it in something that makes sense to their brain, then it's more approachable and they can begin to make management decisions.
Mm. So the good, bad, better, the ranking of our abilities
Hmm.
with money, not healthy. Our relationship, our story, our purpose, our what? What do we replace that with? What's the verbiage
Mm.
that we replace that with?
Well, that's when I flip it to, what story do you want it to tell? And we look at, okay, here's what I want it to tell. And that doesn't have to be perfect. It's a first draft, just like if you're writing a book report, so that you can look at and say, this is kind of what I want it to do. And then we can put math behind that and say, okay, well, if you want to do these things, experience this, leave this, have this set aside, then we do math, and maybe that's accounts for everything. But often we've forgotten something because our money mental math is usually wrong. So we want to approach that without judgment too.
Yeah, and get a hold of it. Yeah, I always start as early as I can with clients, widows, anyone really I work with, and asking, what is the purpose? What do you want this
Yeah.
to do for you? What is it? If it's a number on a screen, it's a
Mhm.
number on a screen, and it means nothing until you can tie that back to something that is tangible, that is meaningful. Is it giving? Is it charity? Is it travel? Is it time with my family? Like what how do you equate those numbers to something that gives you joy and satisfaction? And then money has a value. Otherwise, it's a number on our screen, and frankly, it's kind of boring. So that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts, and it's delicate with widows, right? Because sometimes, frankly, some of them just haven't even thought about that they're just getting through tomorrow, let alone what do I wanna have 10 years from now and 20 years from now and my children and my children's children, there's a time for that, but it is not early on. It takes
Yeah.
a while for that. Although there are some exceptions for that for sure. But that conversation, at least in my experience, has been a while after. Like, let's just make sure that we're taking care of your day to day to day. And now at time, let's now expand it out. Let's find your story. Let's find your purpose. Let's find the meaning behind money. And what a wonderful place. If I do anything for people, if I help them do something different with their money that they thought they could never do, and they come back and send me a picture of a family vacation that they had, and they're like, this was really cool. Thank you for doing this. That's I think the joy of
Yeah.
and speaking from my own history, right? That's I've had to deal with my own relationships with money, and it's taken a long time to really think differently because of the story that I had growing up, and it is a process. I should have known you, Wendy, a long, long time ago. You made it
I wish I'd
faster.
known myself also, because yeah, I had to work through my own money story too,
It
for
is
sure.
true. It is true.
Mhm.
That's why what you say resonates so well with me because I've had to experience it on my own, and it's a real phenomenon if we're conscious of it and if we do something about it. It's not real if we just ignore it and nothing changes. But if we're conscious, aware of it, there's some work to be done there. Probably for everyone.
I would say easily, I think everyone could benefit from at least talking through their money story, like, because most people have never done that, and just kind of gone back through their timeline and put in the big money moments in it. That really helps them begin to understand some of their current behaviors and decision
It's so
making.
cool. It's so cool.
Hmm.
All right, we're at the end here, Wendy. A widow watching this late at night on her own. Two things that you
Mm,
say, small steps, baby
yeah.
steps towards her money. What are they?
Well, I'll repeat what we've kind of talked about today is reminding yourself you're not broken. Like you aren't. Even if you feel overwhelmed or stuck or whatever is happening, it's figure outable. We'll get there. And so being able to have that comfort of
Yeah,
it's okay. You are where you are. That is okay. And that's all you can be right now. And then having that ability to break things down. If something feels too big, I usually just start by cut it in half. If you think you've got to go through all your bank statements, then cut it in half and do 6 months worth. And if that's too much, cut that in half and then cut that in half because we want to consistently break things down to the manageable pieces, whether it be time or task or whatever's happened or emotions, like breaking that down with that compassionate curiosity and no judgment. That tends to make a really big difference
that's
in my experience.
awesome. That's awesome. And maybe do as the sign behind you says, Wendy, just breathe.
Right. Just breathe. I know. Gosh, it's such a simple thing. I forget to do it myself too, but there's a lot of data and science behind it if that's fun for somebody that's listening, but being able to pause and take that breath helps reset a lot in your body and brain. Then you can come back into the whatever
Now
money
our
thing you're
watch
trying
is
to do.
reminded to do it, right? If we forget our watch,
Exactly.
it's
Right?
time to breathe. So I mean,
Yes.
look how far we've come, Wendy.
Hmm. And we're still breathing.
Wendy,
That's good.
yes, it is. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and sharing your years of knowledge and experience. Yeah,
Happy
we'll
to.
we'll plug in some of your information on the notes because I'd love to be
Yes,
able to share that if you're comfortable doing that. I
absolutely.
think our
Yeah.
listeners would benefit from that. So thank you again so
Yeah,
much
because
for today.
that will be fantastic.
Thanks, Wendy.